So first, I'm going to start by saying I'm very, very excited about this panel. I'm happy with everything we're offering today, but there's just I'm expecting a lot from you two. I'm excited for the topic. These are two amazing women and with a lot to share. Brooke Lark, she got started in psychedelic healing while looking for protocols for her then husband, a combat vet with PTSD. After finding ketamine therapy, the results were so profound, she began volunteer work with the nonprofit Ketamine Fund. Since then, unexpected life trauma led Brooke into deeper discovery, where she experienced healing more powerful than 1,000 years of therapy. That's a theme we're hearing repeated today. A creative agency owner by day, a natural storyteller, and unabashed sharer of her experiences, her insights. Her experiences. Her insights have helped many break through the fear of psychedelia, embracing their own journeys to expansive wholeness, light, and joy. And Trish Damon, she is somebody new to me, but I'm really happy she and I are getting to know each other. She is an accomplished professional in the health and wellness sector. Prior to joining Novamind, Trish developed wellness centers internationally in New York, Texas, Hawaii, California, Utah, and France. She has significant experience developing innovative therapeutic settings for psychedelic medicine and is a co-founder of Circadia, a therapeutic retreat center based in Costa Rica. In February 2021, so just now, Trish was featured in a docuseries on trauma and the use of psychedelic medicine on Whole TV. And as I said, I'm excited to hear what these women have to share with us. So I'm going to turn it straight over to you guys, and I'm here. So if you have any problems or issues at all, just speak up and I'll pop right back on. Thanks.
Second. There. Hi, Trish. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Well, hello. It's so good to be talking with you.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Yeah. We wanted to start, Trish and I kind of connected a couple of times before meeting to make sure that we were on the same page. And we were on so many of the same pages that we didn't even realize that potentially the reason that we were called into this was because of an experience that we both had together. And we realized this morning, Steve Uricourt, that the real thing that this should be called is not embracing your divine femininity. It should be how to survive a life without breast implants. Because Trish and I have both had massive interactions with our own femininity in a variety of ways, but particularly with explants. So we have a lot to talk about, from trauma to our bodies, to our sexuality, to what is divine femininity. And I think the thing that we both wanted to say is that Mormon or not Mormon, this is not a discussion about dogma. Divine femininity is a discussion really that is required at like a more cultural level, because we live in a patriarchal society. And so we hope that the things that we have learned on our path, whether they resonate with your path or they're different from where you are on your path, we hope that you will really get the sense of like the bigness and the beauty and the universality of these ideas that we're going to talk about. Trish, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. Thank you so much. And so great to be here. And, just to echo what you said, this really isn't the premise about leaving or staying in the church, but rather how to come home to your femininity after healing post-traumatic growth, as I like to say. And again, to echo what you had said, what I thought I would talk about and what the audience may want to hear this morning was quickly tossed out. And although I pride myself on authenticity, I also realized that not only this was about sharing my wisdom, but also where I am in my path of healing the divine feminine as well, because it is a journey and it's something that I continue to unfold. daily in my practice. I think that, with this, my story is a bit of an ontology, like so many in this space. And what began as a personal story and search for meaning quickly transcended into how can I help others heal as well through trauma. And so I'm just grateful to be here and to be able to share in this forum as well.
Awesome. Well, let's dive in. I think that it's really important for us both to kind of share what our initial stories and backgrounds are. So would you share a little bit about your background, what you kind of grew up understanding womanhood was, and then maybe get a little bit into, because I think that so often the thing that brings us from where we are and what we learned to, oh my gosh, this stuff isn't making sense and I need to find another way, is trauma. So do you want to share a little bit of your story about not only your background and understanding about what you grew up, the story that you grew up around femininity and womanhood, but then just some of your story about how that was also taken away from you?
Absolutely. So I think to have this be the most meaningful, I'll dive a little bit into my personal story and then dovetail into that, my path and what that meant about my femininity and most certainly my sexuality. So I was raised Mormon, baby of 9 children, and at the age of 16 became pregnant. And my family had kind of shipped me away at the time. We were living in California and shipped me to Provo to an all-girls school. And as I went through that experience of being pregnant at a young age and trying to navigate that, and then also being extracted from my community, I was in the hospital and had some complications with my delivery. And when I came to, after being rushed into surgery, there was this family there holding my baby. And I had pleaded with my family to keep my son. And I think oftentimes the shame that's encompassed around the church and kind of that narrative was something that, if we can out of sight, out of mind, and then move on with your life. I ended up through a confluence of events, and for the sake of time, I won't dive into now, ended up keeping my son. But at 9 months old, I went to go see the bishop of the church, and he had expressed to me that he had had a vision from God that this child was no longer supposed to be with me. So at 9 months old, after bonding with my child, he was then adopted out. And, what happened for me at that time was my coping mechanism was perfectionism and success throughout my life. If I can conceal what's happened, then I can move on and not really look at, some of the fundamental things that were happening in my family infrastructure. And so at the age of 18, my son came back to live with me. And all of a sudden my trauma was sitting in my living room. And although I had waited for this moment for so many years and to be reconnected with him and have that opportunity to be in his presence, I was alarmed at my inability to love and embrace him the way a mother would a child. And what happened was I started having nightmares and post-traumatic flashbacks of childhood abuse that continued for several nights. And many of those included sexual abuse, physical abuse, and emotional abuse. And I think that up until then, I had tethered to the idea of, isn't this the best thing that could have happened? Look at God has been protecting you. And again, I want to be clear, this isn't a matter of, saying that the church necessarily was wrong, but I think that definitely there are some fundamental things that influenced what had happened. And so for me, I got to a point where I found myself one day sitting on my bedroom floor, just praying to God to show me a path to healing. And it was probably the first time I had prayed in quite some time, because I had I think we either adopt or rebel against, religion in general, depending upon the constructs that we were raised. And so it became clear to me at that time that my path to healing was through psychedelic medicine. And it was really then that my journey began, and my first deep dive, other than, the occasional recreational use of psychedelics in my early 20s that I found my path to the jungle to do my first dose of Iboga.
Oh, you started with Iboga?
I started with Iboga.
Oh, wow. That's mad respect. I mean, so for people who don't know, because I think that Iboga is kind of not very often talked about, whereas ayahuasca is a 6-hour journey, Iboga can last up to 24 hours. And they say, Aya is the mother. Iboga is like the angry grandfather who's like, come, let me show you what you have done wrong. And I hear that it's like incredibly transformational, but also like, wow, way to start there, girl.
Yeah. And I won't dive too deeply into Iboga itself because I'm not certain that this is the forum for it. But to your point, Iboga is the most powerful hallucinogen of all of them. The journey lasted for me, I would say, actually having a psychedelic experience almost 18 hours, and then it goes on until the next day. And I actually did 2 deep dives with Iboga. Wow. And for me, it was, what I experienced during that journey was the day that I was born and reliving all of the trauma and abuse that I had gone through. And I think that until we can bring that which has afflicted us into the light for us to have awareness, then the true healing begins. And so for me, that really was the first time that I was able to start to address some of the traumatic events that had happened in my life.
Amazing. Wow. Yeah. So that, it's so interesting because in hearing even just about your experience, that it's interesting to me how many of us need to be reminded of these basic things, like where we came from. And I feel like psychedelics do that, even though my background was very, very different from yours. So I grew up in a family where my parents just essentially abandoned us when I was 18, got a divorce, dropped us off at my grandma's house. And I knew that it was messed up, but, I was just like pretty close to graduation and I'm going to get myself to BYU. And my mom had left the church. And so I doubled down because I knew that was right and true and good. And got to BYU and found myself the first full-time seminary teacher that I could possibly talk into marrying me before I was a sophomore. I was on the track and had babies really fast. And then in 2008, I believe it was, has it been? Yeah, that seems right. 2007, 2008, massive faith crisis hit. And as part of that, my ex-husband, my husband at the time, who had been a seminary teacher, had to quit his job. So, we upend our life. We quit the job 1 week, and the next week we send in our resignation. We quit the church. So our entire identity is, and everything I've ever staked my identity on is gone. And in a matter of months, everything unraveled. My ex decided that he wanted to move away. And I essentially overnight went from stay-at-home mom living the Mormon dream to in charge of everything. I had to find a way to feed my babies, keep us not homeless. Figure out, like, how do you have a career when the only thing you ever wanted to do was like hold children in front of the fireplace in a rocking chair. And so that led to some really massive rage, because I couldn't understand how, when you were doing everything so right as a woman, the woman that I had been told I should be, how everything could fall out so quickly. And then suddenly I'm stuck in a life that makes no sense in a world that I am not prepared for. And so my first kind of aha moment was studying the myth of Athena. And I stumbled upon it one day, and it said, it was like on Wikipedia. I don't even remember why I ended up reading it. And it said on Wikipedia that Athena is the goddess of war, which everybody knows, but it was also wisdom and arts and crafts and civilization and courage and strength. And I was like, hold on a second. So like women have been doing everything for like since the beginning of time. And it was this really big aha moment for me. So I really started to embrace this other side of being a woman that I didn't know that I could embrace. And I became strong and successful. And I really thought that I was kicking ass until about 2 years ago, I got sick from having my breast implants in, which I didn't know at the time. That really made me quite vulnerable, and really grateful when a friend started coming around, and I ended up in a marriage that turned just horrifically physically and mentally and emotionally abusive. I mean, just like I couldn't even use the term abuse for so long because it felt so strange that I had landed in that. And so 351 days after we got married, I said, this story can't work anymore. And I knew that through that, I had started to find ketamine therapy for him, but I'd never done anything for myself. But it became really clear really fast that, when I thought that I had all of my ducks in a row, if I was susceptible to this kind of a relationship, that there was something that I was missing. I realized that I didn't have a voice. I realized that all of my strength and success had been rooted in this proof of something that I wasn't really. And so that is when I really started to dive deep into talk therapy. And, I'd go and the therapist would say, I think you're doing great. You seem like great. And I was like, there is something deeper. There's something inside of me that I know needs to be loosened and come out. And so, in the course of those events, I really started to look into what kind of psychedelics, could I journey with. And man, it's been phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So,
and I think there's something, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think something that comes forward for me, and some of, I used to see clients one-on-one to just do executive coaching, and those that were either in the church or leaving the church, one of the inherent overarching themes that I would address is that everyone felt from the day that they were born that they weren't good enough. You're born into this belief system that everything that you do is misaligned or out of, the eyes of God and what those beliefs are. And so I think, going back to your question earlier of what were the constructs that I believed femininity to be. And, I think for me, I always believed that sex was wrong. My body was meant to be a temple, although my body was being abused from the time I was a very young girl. And so when you live in that duality of not knowing right from wrong, and my body is a temple, but I'm also being abused, and how do I reconcile this discord that lives within me? For me, psychedelics allowed me to disassemble this belief system of not being good enough, that I wasn't empowered to know what was best for my body or even my own femininity. I grew up in a house where my mother struggled with an eating disorder, and even how we care for our bodies and what that looks like, and to be nurturing. And so that is something that I have taken a deep dive in with psychedelic medicines, of coming back home to this vessel. And what does that mean for me? What is my interpretation of femininity? What is my personal expression of my own femininity? What does that mean for me sexually? And really, learning that through different practices and modalities that are available to us.
I love that. And I think that you really touched on something that I think just about every woman and even man, but especially I think women who grow up in the cultures that we have grown up in, is this general underlying story that is, you can't trust yourself. We know better. And so trust us. And so you're in this constant state of sacrifice and second guessing yourself, until you're so lost and incapable of choosing something for yourself without feeling like a horrible, selfish, witch crone. And so I think that I'd love to talk about that more But particularly under the giant umbrella of like, will you share how you first met the divine feminine? Or just a moment when you were like, oh, I understand this in a whole new way.
Well, I think when you're dealing with childhood trauma, specifically, the behaviors that manifested for me were inclusive of depression, anxiety, addictions, eating disorders, body dysmorphia. There were so many symptoms that were presenting. And I, have always been a seeker. I've been in the health and wellness space for 17 years and have tried many different modalities to kind of get to the underbelly of what this was. And for me, in an ayahuasca journey, I had the opportunity when the shaman came and started working on my body that I had never experienced safe touch. I had never, even with romantic partners that I thought I trusted and were in a committed relationship with, there was always this undercurrent of not being able to trust or understand sexuality or even intimacy for that matter. And I know that for so many years, I would point my finger at my partners, like, if you were just better, we would be okay, and not really acknowledging the role that I was playing in my inability to be fully intimate and present and comfortable in my own body. Right. And so I think I went through years of self-hatred with my body and not understanding how to be in that feminine essence. So to speak more specifically, as I was going through this ayahuasca journey and she started working on me, all of a sudden it came through to me how deeply my heart had broken when my son was taken from me, and how I adopted this belief that I would never be good enough, that I would never be lovable, that I could never love. And it wasn't until that moment that I realized I am love, and no one can ever take that from you. That's not something that someone can divinely extract from your being. It is all of our very essence that we're born with, is that innate ability to love and share love and be in that container. And so I think, for me, and then through a tremendous amount of sound therapy and things like that, I learned how to sing that heart song back to me, back to my body, back to my essence, to be in loving resonance with that, as opposed to constantly rejecting the very thing that we all are craving for, right? In our lives, we're all looking to be loved and to find that self-acceptance along the way. So, being with the Divine Mother and sitting with her and learning how to commune with love in general and get comfortable with the discomfort, right? Of, when your baseline for normal is trauma, when you all of a sudden are infused with love, it isn't that comfortable. It's not like, oh, I've waited my whole life for this. Here it is. Wow, this feels wonderful. It actually takes practice and getting comfortable with being in that container of lovability and being able to express love that's unconditional. And I think oftentimes, at least in my experience with my family, love was always conditional. If you do this, then you'll be loved. If you do this, then you're accepted. If you do this, then you are in the eyes of God, a divine being. But until then, you aren't, right? You have to kind of earn that love along the way. And so for me, stepping into this new way of being continues to be a work in progress, and being able to even be naked and be in loving resonance with our very innate creation of being a woman and expressing femininity in a way that's safe, not only for myself, but others, and being comfortable in that container.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So again, I think it's so fascinating to hear your story, which is so different than mine. And yet to recognize that the same lessons came to me in many of my interactions with, particularly and most specifically, I would say ayahuasca. Aya has been I think my purest understanding of what feminine energy is, and the endless and phenomenal and complex possibility of the divine feminine. But that's exactly how my very first journey. I mean, it was a trip too, but it was a journey, began when, I laid on the mat, and it was the most overwhelming sense of love. But it wasn't coming from this way. It was coming from here, and it was coming out, and it was radiating out from me. And I remember saying to her, Mother Aya, I remember, saying to her, oh, this is what I am. Like, I am love. And she, and I had kind of come to the mat thinking that I am going to lay in the arms of a mother who's going to cry with me. I've just come out of this abusive marriage, and poor me, and I try so hard. And it was like this first few minutes of just absolutely radiating golden, phenomenal white essence of love. And then her voice was like, why do you keep letting things get in the way of this? And she immediately took me back.
Yeah, because love comes through us, right?
Yes. And she immediately took me back, and I had to go revisit these very specific memories, kind of similar to you, from where she would say, why are you just standing there? Why are you not using your voice to protect this love that you are? Why are you allowing cruelty? Why are you allowing these things to be taken away? And it was a lot more of a come to Jesus than I had expected. And man, it was hours of me realizing that, the divine feminine is not just Maria from The Sound of Music, which is what I always thought. Like, even after becoming like the cool, badass business owner, I still curated this like sweetness. And in that first journey with Aya, I realized, oh, the divine feminine is also the mama bear. She's also a whore. She can be slutty and tricky and complex and beautiful and fierce. And it really started to change the way that I understood my own walk through life needed to be and could be. And so, for me, that has been the biggest awakening. I think that in our culture, we have so many stories like, be a girl boss, or like get after it. And those are all like really great and generally true options for life for women. But for me, the like really tapping into what is the divine feminine, first and foremost, was tapping into, we call it the flow. Like, the divine feminine is water. It can be, and if you think of like water pouring into, it can go into every corner. It can be wild, it can be strong, it can be soft, it can be so many things. And my first understanding of that kind of came through ayahuasca, and then has expanded tremendously through other experiences with psychedelics. But there's no way that any other form of healing could have possibly explained it to me as quickly and as specifically to my experience. It was as if I had met someone who had created the first cell of me, and was able to take exactly the right parts and put them together and say, let me explain to you what you're not seeing and how you're standing in your way and what you are. So with that said, I'm interested in how an understanding of what the divine feminine is has led to your continued growth, or, just how has it changed you and changed your path?
Absolutely. Well, I think that that's something I'm still coming home to, right? And I think that with femininity in general, we're in this era where, the duality and the toxic masculinity is coming forth, but also how do women sit in the presence of the masculine? How have we abused our femininity? I know for me, being a survivor of sexual abuse, that represented in promiscuity and ways that I abused my body. And so I think there's some incredible tools that we have now by way of Tantra and breathwork and yoga to come back home to our bodies, even, dance and movement and feeling all the essence of our body and being able to feel. And I think one of the most important things for me is how can I feel safe in my body? And how can I then express my femininity into the world in a way where I can continue to feel safe? I think one of the things that we talk a lot about in the medicine space is the power of intention. Right. And so for me, my intention has always been, I want to come home to emotional freedom. I want to have the freedom of expression, whatever that means for me. And I think I'm almost reluctant to articulate what that is because it's so specific and individual to each of us. And that's what we are all striving to find. What is it that I believe? What is it that I want? What is it? How can I express in the world? Did I lose you for a moment? I might have lost you. Oh. Back.
So Brooke, I'm seeing Trish in and out. Is that, oh,
I'm back.
Okay, great. I'm letting you take it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, my thing just popped out.
Sorry. Yeah, as did mine. So I think that, that's something that's just been important to me in kind of finding purposes at work and coming back home.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I think that it is so profound that you've used your experiences to get to a place where you want to help other people too, because I know that for me, stepping into the psychedelic space felt very, very scary. And not only just not knowing what I was getting into, but for me, the bigger thing with psychedelia has been that part of my healing has been other people teaching me how to use the psychedelics to access things I didn't know I was allowed to access. So for one of those, I remember in the very in the very beginning of my second ayahuasca journey, I was, so excited. And I was like, okay, I'm here. I can't wait for you to show me the love. Show me the love. I love that feeling. Remind me that I feel like love. And immediately it was almost like strobe lights. And Aya kept saying, I'm a trickster. I'm a trickster. And with this very joking voice. And I was like, no. I'm here for love. I'm here for love. And then she just kept saying, I'm a trickster. I'm a trickster. And it's been interesting because as I've started working with other psychedelics, one of the things that I have had to learn about myself is that I'm allowed to play. It took so long, I took myself so seriously for so long. And it was through the work of two women really that, I call them my psychedelic mentors. The first 2 or 3 or 4 times that we would get together and have, these evening experiences together, I'd sit there and be like, yeah, it's nice. I'm just waiting for that feeling of booze to kick in where I have no inhibitions. And it was just them showing me over and over and over again, get playful. You are allowed. Sparkles can be funny. You can wear glitter. It's okay. And they have so helped me unlock, I feel like each psychedelic has a different personality. And allowing myself to start to play with all of these different personalities has helped me expand my own understanding of, that, again, that divine, really embracing the bigness of what divine feminine it can be. So
Yeah, and I
we
think,
limit ourselves so much.
yeah, I think something that comes up for me at that point, and I know we don't have a lot of time, but when your heart is open and you align with the miracles that can show up through these medicines, and we take down the disbeliefs and we disassemble the limiting beliefs, one of the things that we both have a commonality around was that I too started getting sick with breast implants. And, I believed that you had to look a certain way in order to be loved or to be feminine or to be sexual. And I have a similar path as yours, that all of a sudden these foreign objects in my body that were full of chemicals. And then also we have to look at, we're placing these chemicals on top of our hearts, our very feminine essence. And then as we do more work in the psychedelic space, or even in our own journey, it doesn't have to be exclusive with psychedelics. I think that our body starts to come home to its own natural equilibrium where things no longer serve us. And we're kind of forced to be in our natural essence. It reminds me of a journey that I had where I laid on the ground, could feel the heartbeat of Gaia and the earth, and how disconnected I have been from that loving resonance that's all around us all the time. And how can we harness and rein that essence and that energy and that vibration? And as we do more healing work, anything that is no longer serving us has a way of extracting itself from our lives, right? And so I think as we see this movement of women rising and claiming their power and claiming their femininity, we're also seeing the rise of women becoming sick by the things that we're doing to our bodies that are harmful and, have chemicals in them, etc. And so, and it's not to say, it's not a blanket statement that all are bad for everyone, but I know for me personally, in order for me to fully embrace my femininity, having something unnatural in my body was no longer serving me. And it's like, this correction that happens.
Yeah. And I wrote about that this week, that for me, when I went through the explant process, it was, I love how you say, like, it was kind of coming back to home. Like I had done all of this work internally, but it became very clear that I was still externally living some other people's stories. And it was time to just reclaim, like to surrender, not even reclaim, to freaking surrender and be like, I have been created in this way to walk through this earth on a timeline that I have been given. And it's time for me to stop pretending like I'm something else. I need to be what I was created to be. And so out come the implants. And I remember that, one of the biggest moments in that, because it was weeks of really just grappling with what is it going to look like? And now I'm not going to be able to walk into a room and look pretty in a bikini. And I remember staying up really, really late one night and doing a Byron Katie worksheet and trying to figure it out. And, kind of making progress. And then the morning after surgery, I stood in front of the mirror and pulled my bandages off and see this, this sutured body that is just still standing, and still attending me and still taking care of me. And I just was like, I get it. I get that I am divine femininity. I don't need it bestowed upon me. I don't need it blessed on me. And me getting to a point where I can just love what is, love what I am, is part of me loving, the bigger concept of the divine feminine, because I am part of her. And so I have to love her from the inside out, because I am her, And so for me, that has been a really big transition in my process, is like psychedelics have helped me just get the hell over myself. Some things just don't matter. And feeling joy in what is and who I am and what I am, and allowing even the imperfections to be beautiful, and allowing myself to be as big or weird or freak flaggy or quiet or whatever it is, that I need to be in any given moment as I transition and move and find my way through life.
And I think so much, something, that came up for me in sharing that is, as I too removed my implants, it's like you kind of have the battle scars of what you've put your body through, and yet your body continues to show up, and the self-judgment and the shame and the guilt and all of it that's keeping us sick. And as I've said so many times, what are the secrets that we're keeping that are keeping us sick, right? And I think even part of that journey of needing the external to reflect who I was inside was part of the misbelief that I had adopted, that I wasn't perfect in my natural form, that I wasn't perfect just the way that I was. And it was part of the secrets that I had kept. I also went through, as I was going through my healing journey, having to have a full hysterectomy. And I believe that I bottled up all of the pain and trauma inside my body until your body gets to a point where it says, enough. I can't do this anymore. I think I saw a comment from someone pass by, what does femininity really mean? And I think for everyone, it is so individual. And it's a matter of, how do you feel the most alive in your own expression of being a female or male or whatever, and it isn't just, I should make mention that it isn't, femininity just isn't for women.
Yes.
The most integrated and beautiful men are those that can hold the container of both the masculine and femininity, and allow that expression within their relationships and their business and all of that to come through in a way that's powerful, where we can see them and connect. Because I think when men show up in their lovability, that truly is meeting the feminine at her very essence and her core, to then create union, common sacred union, whether it be for intimacy or sexuality. And so there's so many different expressions of that. And it's so fun, because we are taught in this culture, suppress, deny, even masturbation is unacceptable, self-pleasure, any of that. And how do you find this sacred communion first with self and then with others?
Yeah. And that's what I wanted to mention, is a great comment that just came through from Alexander. And Alexander, thank you for this. He says, we have all been denied the sacred feminine, men as well. This is a little ironic given the fact that we left Mormonism, which actually has the potential to embrace the divine feminine with the Heavenly Mother. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and she was saying, I said, how are you doing? And she said, I'm good. I'm just in a little bit of my masculine energy right now, because, she was needing to be analytical about some math things and change, some budget things, and change some things in her life. And so we started talking about how one of the tragedies of our culture is that we do think that femininity, the divine feminine, is only for women. And it's not. Those spirits can move through all of us. And so I really do appreciate, and I do want to honor that, having been in a relationship with an absolutely broken, tragic figure of a man who has swallowed every story about what masculinity is supposed to be, in my abusive marriage, my heart really is sad for the stories that men have gotten as much as women. We are all limited by these stories that suppress us and keep us in control and tell us that we're only lovable on conditions. And so, Alexander, thank you for that. And you're exactly right. I mean, when we're talking about all of these things, femininity is wildness and nurturing and flow and creativity and men are allowed that too. And actually, like you said, Trish, should have an abundance of that. It's this yin and yang thing that can live inside all of us.
And I think owning who we are and what we believe to be true versus what we are told to be true can be liberating and align us on our path to freedom, right? And I think internally, if we can come to that place of self-awareness as opposed to acting outwardly, we can put a gap in that space that allows for introspection and deep healing. And as I always say, and I offer it to those listening, I love the expression, don't ever waste a good trigger. So something within us that gets triggered and we have that reaction and we want to outwardly react, it's such a beautiful opportunity to go for inward reflection, to see what it is that needs to be healed, to see what is under that. And, I was with a partner who was a sex addict, and the judgments I had around that and how hard it was for me to unpack that. And as I continued my path to healing, I could see the woundedness of where it came from, as opposed to it coming or being an act against me, right? And so much of that was the premise of sex is wrong and how you do it is wrong and how others go about it is wrong. And I think that everyone has to define within their own relationship what is, the playground that they want to play, and no one else can define that for you. That is up to us to really explore and have those inward conversations with ourselves.
Absolutely. So we have just about 10-ish minutes, and we talked a little bit about, offering our great wisdom, but also the fact that both of us have things that we're working on now. I think getting acquainted with the divine feminine is a beautiful first step, but it is certainly not an arrival point. So first, to anyone watching, if you do have questions, I see a couple coming through and we will attend to those next. So we'll give you just a few minutes to pop in any questions. But for a couple of quick minutes, Trish, will you share, where are you in your journey with discovering your divine feminine and getting in touch, more fully in touch? And what are you working on? What the hell are you working on? Tell us that.
Well, I think that, my work right now is really coming to that place of self-love. I had this body as a young girl that birthed a child at the age of 16, and your body changes. And then you go through explant and your body changes again. And I, had breast implants starting at the age of 17 and had them for 26 years before removing them. And how do I come into this loving resonance? And I think that, something that I love and a practice that I do is, how do we navigate and reach the most loving and compassionate place in us for our full expression of love? And so beginning the day asking, I will love myself when, no one will love me until, and answering those questions of, and digging underneath the layers. I will love myself when, what are the limiting beliefs that I can unpack around that? And I think one of the most profound practices that I have right now is going to a place of compassionate self-forgiveness. And in the beginning, it was, I had to kind of force myself to go to that place. And now it can become more of an instantaneous response of, when you look in the mirror and, these self-judgments, and now they're coming out that now that we're doing more Zoom calls, the rise of facial plastic surgery is escalating because we're looking at ourselves all day. And so I think that it's a matter of, how do I love myself exactly the way that I was intended to be in this body without changing anything? And what are the practices of self-love and self-care that I can tether to every day? And for me, that's meditation and diet and exercise and getting in nature and communing with spirit, and whatever interpretation that is for others. But I would love to hear some of your practices as well.
Yeah, well, and I shared with you when we spoke that one of the most profound things that I've ever done. I mean, I like to really shortcut the process. And so when I knew that it was going to be really hard for me to wake up and look at my body every day, I just called a friend and I was like, I need to hire you to do a nude photo shoot. And I don't want it to be boudoir. I want it to be art. So it was a 3-hour shoot. And I just was like, move me, shoot me, show me the lines, make me look at myself. And that, I think art has been a really profound way for me to interact with these ideas and start to explore them and allow imperfect to be beautiful, helping myself deconstruct ideas. I would say for me, my current divine feminine path, my next thing that I'm working on is learning to ask for help. I have a boyfriend right now who is just a dear and beautiful and lovely human. Oh, we have 3 questions, so I'm going to go fast. And he said a couple of weeks ago, we were on a trip and he said, my darling, would you go get me a sparkling water? And I said, sure, I would love to. And I run and get him a sparkling water and I bring it back. And he goes, you never asked me to do anything for you. And I was like, I don't? No, surely I do. And he's like, you have no needs. And he's like, it's time that you get needs. And so that was a big wake up call for me to realize like, oh, so much of my divine feminine is still learning that I don't just have to be the one in charge and independent and Athena, I can also be soft and big enough to have needs and trusting enough that, someone would want to take care of me even when I'm imperfect. So I still have a lot that I know I need to work on. I also, let's save 2 minutes at the end, Trish, because I want each of us to share for someone who is looking for a way to start interacting with the divine feminine, where to start. But we have 4 questions. So I'm going to ask really fast. Matt says, have you found that by embracing the divine feminine, that you've also been able to then better connect with the divine masculine? While I was in the church, I found I could not connect with the mother, but once I finally understood my own masculinity from a healthy viewpoint, I was finally able to connect with the divine feminine and open myself fully to both sides.
Would you like to go first, or would you like me to?
Yeah. Mine is just a resounding hell yes. Like I am in the healthiest and most joyful relationship finally, because I'm not hitting, I'm not just beating one drum, which is to be a woman is soft or independent. To be a woman, it's like, good Lord, child, calm down. You can be a lot more. It's a lot more fun. So for me, really starting to understand how expansive I could be, I think has absolutely opened that flow up to that like masculine container that makes me feel safe, but in order to feel safe by the masculine container, I had to be willing to be whole. So yeah, for me, absolutely. How about you?
Yeah, I think for myself as well. I mean, most certainly, I think there is an element of safety, being safe with ourselves first. And I think for me, it was learning how to trust myself and trust my own intuition, which was suppressed for so long. Don't listen to your inner knowing, listen to everyone, outside of you when you're being told. And then I think for me in relationships, specifically in intimate relationships, setting safe boundaries for myself that feel comfortable, and then being able to express those and have them be met, and not staying in dysfunctional relationships and not staying in, whether it be with a lover or even friendships, being, I believe so wholeheartedly in reciprocity. Am I getting the love from this that I'm also giving? And so it has absolutely transformed my relationships at large. And I think that it continues to blossom. And the more that I do my work on my femininity and healing my abuse, the love that is pouring in my life is just astounding.
Oh, that makes me so happy. What a beautiful truth. Brenda says, how do you deal when you are being true to yourself and you come up against either explicit or subtle disapproval? It's so tiring to me. I'll let you go first.
You'll let me go first. I think one of the things that I love, you cannot defeat someone who knows who they truly are. And so, I've gotten to a place where I know who I truly am. And I know that I live in my truth every day. And the moment you know with full certainty and your intention is fully aligned with what you believe, all bets are off because you've already won, right?
Absolutely.
And so I would just offer that once you truly know who you are, the external rhetoric becomes irrelevant.
Absolutely. And that goes to answer a little bit a question that we had from Erin about, when you're getting all of these stories, how do you know that you've stepped into your own version of the divine feminine? And how do you integrate that when others are not in a place to accept that information? And for me, I think, there are a couple of phrases that I've learned along the way that have helped. One phrase is, I am unavailable for this. And I am only available for peace. I am unavailable for this conversation. And I had to learn that early on in my divorce. I had, my fabulous gay best friend said, why do you keep letting him call you and text you and send you all of these messages? And I was like, well, because we were married. And he's like, no. And he said, what you do is you just say, I'm available. I am unavailable for this conversation. And then he will text you awful things. And you say, I am unavailable for this conversation. And there's something about learning that I was allowed to just say that and opt out that really helped awaken me to what it was to start, we call them boundaries, but it's like, you are 102,000,000% allowed to do or not do whatever it is that you so desire. And so for me, learning I am unavailable. And then the other one is I am available for peace. And that's when I say to myself. And so in any given moment, if I'm starting to feel drama, because I think it's easy when you've grown up in a traumatic childhood to kind of seek out drama or feel comfortable in drama, to just say to myself, I'm only available for peace. And so the fastest way to that is what it is. And so, if somebody, I don't care what the story is. Was she my best friend and she gave me a ring from Claire's? I am unavailable. I'm unavailable to that. I'm only available to peace. And so those two things have really helped me start to interact externally and internally with a life that helps me have the space to understand what works for me.
Yeah. And I think I want to say just one thing, and Sarah, I see you there. Before you embark on your quest, you must first articulate your vision. What is it that you want? What is it that you want to call in? And so some of these questions around femininity and how do you get there, sometimes it can be just a curiosity. I want to explore more, understand what that means for me. So once you set your course, it doesn't have to be a public or formal declaration to your family or your partner, but it does need to be clear and your intention with spirit. And I think particularly in today's climate, when there's a palpable craving for meaning and authenticity, people can feel what's real and what's not. And so if you want others to support your idea, stand up for what you hold sacred, even if that's in the space of just exploration or learning, what it is that you do want. And I think those that sent you your truth will rise up and they will support you where you're at. And you also need to believe in your truth that healing is possible and that emotional freedom is tangible and within reach. And I think that we both are living proof of that. And I think it's just so important to set your intention of what it is you want to call in.
Trish, I'm so happy for everything that you've overcome and everything you've become. You're so beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Hi, that was awesome, you guys. Thank you so much. Both powerful stories and real examples of what true femininity is. So thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing your energy and your stories and your insights.